big revelations from an Everton business perspective today, which is surprising because obviously as a business, Everton haven't been ran the best these last, 10 years. But this breaking news is very positive in a load of different ways, basically. And believe it or not, I have a business degree. So let's see if we can get some use out of that and understand why the shirt sponsor and the stadium are way bigger from a financial perspective than we ever could have thought. And if we go to this first, if we go over here, not that one, this one. We go here. Thanks to the Friedkin Group, the new stadium are in advanced negotiations with major brands willing to pay record fees to become the shirt sponsor. And why is that important? Well, firstly, it increases our revenue from a shirt sponsor perspective. That record fee, because Everton are such an attractive proposition now, it's tantalizing for these big brands, and for Everton to be associated with these big brands, it's only a positive because it means more money for the club, more exposure in different parts of the world, and that will come through sponsorship opportunities. For example, there's no concrete link so far, but some of the names being floated about are Toyota, ChatGPT, which is a bit, and then as well Qatar Airways. But when you think about the global appeal of those brands, Toyota, for example, absolutely huge in Japan, one of the biggest household names in Japan. They already sponsor Nagoya Grampus, who is a partner for Everton. They have the shirt sponsor for Nagoya Grampus, but as well have named the stadium Toyota Stadium, and they pump money into that. Look at other sports, the World Rally Championships. Toyota consistently have a car there, and those cars cost about 400,000 per car, and they go through about 6 or 7 a year. So it shows how much money Toyota are willing to commit to these things, and that through a shirt sponsor could bode incredibly well for Everton in terms of revenue. But there's more to this business update, because if we go to this, we can see that the club are close to a major front of shirt deal. However, every penny earned is to fund the summer transfer window, and as well ambitions to bring a European Cup final to the Hill Dickinson. And why is all of this important when it comes to the Premier League's new financial rules? Well, if we go over here, these are the new financial rules, and I watched the podcast on this from James Olcott and The Long Play, where they talk about these new rules coming into the Premier League, why PSR is going, and this new squad cost ratio is coming in. And why is that important? Well, this is important because PSR was driven from a loss perspective, meaning that you could lose a certain amount of money, £115 million, over a 3-year period. However, this new squad cost ratio is now you're allowed to spend 85% of your revenue for that year on your team, meaning that the higher the revenue is, the higher your ability to spend is. And if you're in European competition, you're allowed to spend 70% of your revenue. And with Everton not in the European competition as it stands, we may qualify, but as it stands, we're not. It puts Everton in a really strong place if we just wait till the summer, and maybe this highlights why we haven't necessarily gone all out in January, because we have this money coming in, and these new SCR rules do massively benefit us, meaning that maybe we can look to spend more in the summer and properly invest in this team. And it was a bit of a question mark as to why we didn't spend much in the summer, but now in January, but now we're kind of seeing maybe the plan is to be able to go big in the summer with these new rules coming in. And as well, if you exceed this 85% threshold of your revenue, it goes up to 115%, and then the punishments start to come in. We're not really sure what this is yet, because there's different types of threshold. You see here, a red threshold is the bad one. Of course it's red. Obviously it would be. And that triggers an in-season penalty. For example, something we know quite well, a point deduction. So the point of all of this is that the Big Six voted for all of this to happen, this new squad cost ratio to come in. And ultimately, the point of it is that Chelsea and other clubs were gamifying PSR because this was perfectly allowed, but it did look bad. Selling hotels, selling your women's team to your sister company was a loophole to get around these rules. And as well, it made selling academy players a more attractive proposition than selling other players, which meant that it just made a mess. You saw it all over the league, Newcastle had to do it with Elliot Anderson. Aston Villa sold Tim Idabunin to us, and we sold Lewis Dobbin the other way to them, just because it all made sense from a bookkeeping perspective. And PSR did allow for some creative accounting at times, and you see it now that this has just caused a lot of problems down the line for other clubs. But the point of all this is that the Big Six voted for this. The Big Six wanted these rules to come in place, the squad cost ratio, because obviously their revenues are much, much, much higher than somebody like Burnley, for example, meaning that it just keeps them at the top. And even if it's only 70% because you're playing in European competition, your 70% is still way higher than a team like Burnley or Wolves or Sunderland's 85% is going to ever be, which means that it just keeps them at the top. Ironically, though, this is now, obviously, Everton have had that periphery view of the Big Six. We're always on the outside of it. With these new rules, it kind of suits us because, as I talked about over here, we've got a brand new stadium, one of the best in the country, and it gives us a platform to monetize it. Obviously, we've already sold the naming rights, but there's more to this because England and women's team are due to play in the Hill Dickinson against Ukraine, I believe. And that's a money spinner. And that counts as Everton revenue because it's our stadium. We'll effectively rent it out to them for that. And then you have things like concerts. Obviously, Tottenham do that and they generate a lot of money. Tottenham also have the NFL in their stadium. And obviously, this is essentially moving away from football and becoming everything is business driven. However, they now kind of go hand in hand and one hand washes the other in terms of the more you make, the better your squad should be in theory. Everton have the 11th highest wage bill in the league right now, and that is roundabout right, I would say, because we've had to obviously cull a lot of the squad and take off a lot of the high earners from the top of the pecking order in terms of finances we spend to give them and pay for their wages. However, 11th is about right. When you look at squad value, it doesn't necessarily translate to where you finish in the league, but one thing that does is wages. The team who spends the most on wages generally finish higher up the table. If you look across the league to Tottenham, they spend money sometimes on transfer fees, but their wages never really match those around them who are also considered in the Big Six. Conor Gallagher, for example, is their highest earner on £200,000 a week, meaning that teams like Man United, who just pay £300,000 a week like it's nothing, blow them out the water. But this new squad cost ratio rule, it kind of helps Everton. Ironically, despite not being a part of the Big Six, we have the facilities to act like a Big Six club. And this is why I'm excited, because every penny earned to fund summer transfer drive. This is Everton knowing the rules. This is Everton understanding that if we bring in the money, we can spend it and it's fine. And the likelihood of us being able to bring in more money than a club like, say, Newcastle, if they don't qualify for the Champions League. I get it, then in the Champions League this season, and that generates a lot of revenue that Everton can't generate. However, over the long term, they may not qualify for Champions League every single season, which means that their revenue is then hampered or dependent on finishing in European competitions, whereas Everton have the financial structures in place with the new stadium, with signing these young players to then build upon it and become more sustainable over the long term, which means that we can slowly start to bring in players, give those players high wages, safe in the knowledge that we can then replenish that in terms of revenue with what we bring in from elsewhere, like a shirt sponsor, like selling out the stadium for different events, and bringing a European Cup final to the stadium is exactly what should be happening, because this is how you generate large scales of money in quick bursts. And if it is a Champions League final, for example, that will generate millions upon millions, and a portion of it, not all of it, will go to Everton. And that as well, it feels essentially like free money at that point, because we have the stadium, we're paying it off. However, there are other factors in terms of paying it off that doesn't really impact us in terms of what we're able to spend, because it's seen as a structure thing, especially in the PSR, didn't really count. But with these new stadiums, they often offer a platform for clubs to be able to expand their revenue. Tottenham, for example. And the only worry I have about a European Cup final being at the Hill Dickinson is that it'll be a Champions League final and you just know who's going to be in the final. And I don't want to see that. I really don't want to see that. But that's me catastrophizing a situation that is likely not to happen. What we do know is happening, though, is that Everton, from a financial perspective, are in a really strong place right now. And this new shirt sponsor, as well as the stadium, could be big financial levers for us to then pull and then reinvest in the squad. And the important part of all of this is that we bring in players, we bring in talent, and we can look to build a really strong project. And I'll be making a video on every single player we sign, just like I did last summer. So make sure to subscribe and like, and even hype the video, as well as leave a comment if you're new, or if you're not, welcome to have anyone. Yeah, thank you for that. This has been a different style of video, but one I've enjoyed making.